we bring in a friend who we've known for years and years and years. He's an author, relationship therapist, Dr. R.G. Allen Wilson.
Some expert advice on how we can all talk to them. Joining us now is relationship expert Dr. R.G. Allen Wilson. She's the author of Courageous Conversations Connect. Good morning, R.G.
Doctor, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning, Janelle. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
And as we mentioned, a lot of people just dealing with anxiety during all of this. What are your suggestions?
Some of the things that we need to remember is that this is temporary. This is temporary inconvenience for long-term gain. And as long as we stay healthy, Janelle, then everything else is recoverable.
Talk to your children about what's happening right now. What are the best ways to do that?
There's some do's and don'ts, right? So you want to tell them that you're going to be here. We're going to be okay. Kids want to know that they're secure and they're safe. So predictability, structure, and consistency. You also want to let them know you have a plan. And even if you don't have a plan, tell them that you're working on one. Well, good morning, everybody. This is Dr. RG, yours truly. Welcome to the Courageous Conversations Connect space. Today is March 10th, 2021. Believe it or not. And we've got a great conversation for you today. Or a great conversation, I should say, to us, because this is all about the crew. I see China is already on. So good morning, China. Bring some more people onto the platform. Let people know that we're here. We're about to have our courageous conversation. Go on over to YouTube if you haven't done so and hit that subscribe button. It's at Ask Dr. RG, AskDrArgie. Hit the notification bell so that you can get notifications when we're doing things and when we're putting content on. Also, make sure that you share. Make sure that you share this video, make sure that you subscribe, make sure that you give us a thumbs up and some smiley faces and hearts. It, of course, helps with the algorithms. And good morning, BJ. Shout out to BJ as a part of our crew, and Bella, who is just such a wonderful doggy. And Bella had surgery yesterday and she is doing fine. So shout out to Bella, making sure that she's okay. I was getting reports from BJ throughout the day. So we're so glad that Bella is a part of our crew and that she's doing well. And I see Charlie's here on the morning. I never see you, Charlie, in the morning on the show. So welcome to the show. Stephanie's on. We got a great show. So he says, let's go, let's discuss. Yes, we are talking about race matters and family matters. And I'm sure that many of you all have heard the interview already about Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. And that sparked quite a conversation. So I want to get into that. I want to make sure that we have as I like to call, the courageous conversation about race, about family matters, and everything in between. So this is what I'm going to do. We're going to take a quick break from our sponsors. You all are we still start off with our breathing, right? So I want you to all tell me in the chat who you're breathing for and with. When we come back from the break, we're going to do our breathing exercises and we're going to get right into the conversation. So put in your chat who you're breathing for. I see Morgan and Charlie text chatting. All right, we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. Stay with us. All right, we are back. That was really quick. So I haven't seen what you all put in the chat in terms of who you're breathing for and with. Since we're talking about Meghan Markle and the monarchy and the royal family, let's kind of breathe for them. Let's breathe for Meghan. Let's breathe for Harry. And let's, of course, continue to breathe for all those essential workers out there. And let's kind of breathe for the women, right? This is Women's Month. Monday was International Women's Day. So I think we need to be breathing for women that all over the world, quite frankly, that are dealing with foolishness sometimes around sexism and racism, like Megan is dealing with as well. And so you all know what we do. We put our fingers, middle finger to our thumb, or our hands over one hand over the next or to the side. We breathe in. We are still breathing in 8 seconds for those 8 seconds and 8 minutes and 46 seconds. You all know the trial for George Floyd is underway. And so we still hold our breath in honor of, quite frankly, all the Black and brown and indigenous people who cannot breathe or either whose lives have been taken unjustly. All right. So at the sound of my voice, get your back straight, get relaxed. I want you to breathe in when I say 3. Breathe in through your nose, hold it for 8 seconds, and breathe out. We're going to do that 5 times. 1, 2, 3. Breathe in. And breathe out. 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 One last time, crew, make it count. Breathe in. And breathe out. All right, that felt good, right? I want you guys to do that throughout the day. Make sure that you get your breaths in. We breathe shallow throughout the day typically, and we don't realize that we're breathing so shallow. So listen, let's get into this. I wrote some notes on my phone the other day when I was listening. I didn't see the whole interview. Actually, I don't know why. Morgan and I think we were watching the All-Star game. So I didn't see the whole interview, but I saw a lot of excerpts from the interview with Meghan Markle and Prince Harry with Oprah Winfrey. Shout out to Oprah for knocking it out of the park with this interview, quite frankly, as well as her BFF, Gayle King. She's been doing some great interviews in the last year as well. I think that they're the GOATs, quite frankly, of interviews. And the questions that she asked, the authenticity that she asked them with, she just went right there. And I guess she has a way of making people feel comfortable, open enough, safe enough to share some things about their lives. And so I guess I want to open up, and Charlie's on here, so I want him to weigh in on this as well. Was anybody surprised that there's racism in the royal family? Was anybody surprised about that? I certainly wasn't surprised. So when Meghan said that there was conversation about her baby, right, and whether or not Archie would be too dark, and whether or not that would be a problem for the royal family, I'm not sure that any Black person was surprised. I mean, this is, the monarchy, the royal family that goes back to Henry VIII, where it was sort of, if you did something wrong, off with your head, right? And so these conversations about whether or not the baby is going to be too dark, or, we all know what Princess Diana went through 27 years or 28 years ago when she called it the same thing, the firm, the institution. It's interesting also, and so I want to get into this in terms of Meghan Markle saying that she thought she had suicidal ideation. She had thoughts of suicide, and she had to actually verbalize it so that it would be real, so that at least somebody would know. And so I really want to have a conversation about that as well, because she's not the only person that has thought about killing themselves, about hurting themselves, about injuring themselves. Oftentimes when people are thinking that way, often they don't feel like they have any alternative. They don't feel like they have anything that's going to make their life better. Certainly she has many resources, but she said in this interview that even when she went to them and said, I need help, same thing that Princess Diana said, I need help. They said, there's nothing that we can do. She thought that she would be protected. And they said, no, we can't help you. We can't protect you. Well, that's not new news either. Black, brown, and indigenous people have felt unprotected. We feel unprotected just walking down the street. How many of us don't know whether or not if our children, our sons, our daughters, ourselves, if we go out, whether or not we're going to get back home safely just going to the store? That's George Floyd was hanging out. He was going to the store. He never got home to his family. So Princess Diana and Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, they aren't the only ones who don't feel safe, but it has created, I believe, a global conversation around race, around sexism, around mental health issues, and quite frankly, family issues. And what happens when your family doesn't, agree? They don't get down with the person that you've chosen to be your partner. It was also interesting that Prince Harry said in the interview that his father stopped taking his calls. And he was very hurt by that because he thought that his father, of all people, would understand, given that he was forced in some ways, from what they say, to marry Princess Diana when that's not the person that he was actually in love with, right? And Princess Diana, I believe, over time recognized that I don't have safety here, nor do I have protection of the person that I even married. So Prince Harry thought, well, at least my father will understand the decision that I've made to protect my wife. And he wasn't even returning her phone calls. So, I want to open the conversation up to, I see Tanya on, I see Jen on. Hey, Jen, it's good to see you. She said, so sorry, I haven't been here lately. No worries about that. So I want to open this up to everyone to think about and to talk about this conversation on race. Do you know anybody that's in an interracial relationship? Have you thought about if you weren't accepted into your family, the family that you married into, what that would be like? Because again, the great thing about this conversation right now is that it has sparked a national dialogue. The not so good thing about this conversation is that oftentimes national and global dialogues, they peter out. After the trend is over and, the news cycle has moved on to the next thing, then people forget about these really major issues. And it's important, it's important to women. I've got my t-shirt on, Black Girls Rock. It's important to our community. Women in many ways are the cornerstone. They're the hallmark. And there's something else that Prince Harry said in the interview that, like, I saw clips of it. He said that he thought that marrying Meghan Markle would be good for the Commonwealth because she would be relatable. The same way I think that they felt that Princess Diana would have been good for the Commonwealth because she was relatable, that people felt like they could connect with her. And even that fabulous wedding that they had where it was so diverse made people think, well, maybe there's now an opportunity for the stage to be set for a conversation around diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity, social justice, being fair, just being fair to people, Black and brown and indigenous people. And so people thought, well, okay, let's give them a shot. And here we find out that, quite frankly, they've just basically turned a blind eye and not paid attention to the suffering, yet again, of a Black woman and the person who has, decided to marry her. Quite frankly, also, she's pregnant right now, so she's having a girl. I'm assuming that there might be conversation about the color of this baby that she's having. And so really, at the end of the day, this is really about humanity, right? We're not surprised about the racism at the highest levels, not nationally, not locally, not globally. No one's surprised. But what do we need to do about it? But he said, I got to go. Charlie says, I got to go. But in a nutshell, absolutely, Charlie. And the bottom line is, if you think about this as it relates to yourself, your own mental health, your own mental well-being, your own family trauma, your own cycles. We got to deal with it. Charlie says, white folks don't care about black folks. They don't see us as humans, in a nutshell. I agree with that, Charlie. In many cases, there are a lot of white folks that don't. I also think that there's an opportunity, though, for us to still have a dialogue and then figure out who's going to be our allies, who's going to stand up based on allyship, who's going to focus on anti-racism, because we do need everybody in this conversation. That's why we need to have the courageous conversations. And, as far as Charlie's comment about humans, you all do know that, like, in the United States, that we're still considered 3/5 of a human being. So Charlie's right about that from the perspective of what's on the legislation. What are the laws? There's still, the Constitution had that Constitution that was supposed to be written for all men who are supposedly created equal, with the exception of black and brown people who are not supposed to be a full human being, right? And that kind of messaging, it's hurtful. And it's also terroristic, quite frankly, because no one wants to be terrorized by the people that they live next door to, the people that they interface with, the people that they work with. We don't want to be treated unfairly simply because we look different. In fact, that's quite frankly, I think, what makes humanity wonderful and great, that we look different, that we talk different, that we act different, that we are different. But if we're not given the honor of being human simply because we're different, then that's a problem. That's a huge problem. So, there's something else that went on yesterday. I think it was yesterday that Piers Morgan, he was I guess he was on his platform having some kind of show in the UK. And the other person that was on the same platform, I forget his name, he was questioning him about his rant about Meghan Markle. And he got up and walked off the stage, or walked off the studio. And so I wanted to ask you guys what you all think about white fragility. What do you think about white fragility? It's very interesting that many people want to hang their hats on freedom of speech, and they want to be able to say what they want to say. So, for example, Piers Morgan said all of the things that he wanted to say about Meghan Markle, that it was the performance of her life, and that, she was just acting, and that she was the actual bully, right? And the only thing that they said, that she was, I think, emailing the staff at 5 o'clock in the morning, or wee hours in the morning. Well, don't you do that? I kind of did that today, actually, because I couldn't sleep, but I didn't expect anybody to respond back to me at 5 o'clock in the morning. I expected them when they got up during normal business hours to respond back. So I don't know that that is bullying, or that she made her sister-in-law cry, those kinds of things. So this is what Piers Morgan was saying. And then the next day, when someone questioned him about it, he got so upset with his white fragility that he left the studio. I don't know whether he quit. I don't know whether he's coming back. But has that happened to any of us, where we've been in board meetings, we've been in business meetings, and when we call often white people out on their stuff, they get fragile? It's Dr. Robin DiAngelo that talks about white fragility. And she has a really great book out. I've heard her speak several times. And when she speaks, she says, I'm talking specifically to the quote unquote woke white folks. The white folks that feel like they've got it all together, and that they feel like they're not doing anything wrong, and that they have like one black friend, or they use these kind of metaphors to make it okay for them to say and do certain things. Well, Cornel West says race matters. And I feel like that until we really have an honest conversation, like what Charlie was saying, an honest conversation about race, about the injustices, about the social inequities, about the ways in which we have been treated for many years in this country and abroad, and about this ideology that even if you have means, let's say in this case, when we're talking about Meghan Markle, even if you have means, that somehow you are protected from racism. Not true. You can be from Penn State or the state pen. You can have a GED or a PhD. You could live in a mansion or live in a shack. It doesn't matter how much you have or the resources you have, because we do live in a socially constructed system. A system. Megan called it the institution or the firm. And then for Black folks in America, there is the institutions of wealth, the institutions of the academy, the institutions of our economy. There are many institutions that we live in that are structured in a way to keep Black people down and brown people down and indigenous people down, Latinx people or any person that's ethnic or culturally aware down, and to elevate this idea of whiteness. You've heard the statement, if you're white, you're right. If you're brown, stick around. If you're Black, get back. Those statements hold true for the lived and shared experiences of all of us. So these are things that are happening. We're not making them up. Kimberly, I see her on. Hey, Kimberly, thanks for joining. I see Serene on. Thanks for joining. These things are happening. The question is, what do we do about it? So whether you're just working in the workforce or in school or walking down the street, whether you've chosen to partner with someone in an interracial relationship or marriage, or whether you're not, whether you haven't, the truth is that if we are, for those of us who are Black, for those of us who are brown, for those of who are indigenous people, we have to have some real conversations with ourselves first, right? And in those conversations with ourselves, we have to be honest with, are we talking to each other about lifting each other up? Are we affirming one another? Are we acknowledging the hurt, the pain, and the trauma that we've all experienced simply for being born in this vessel that has a different texture, a different color, a different culture? Are we having the real conversations with ourselves? There's 5 things that I have people to think about when you are tapping into some of that trauma, some of that pain, some of that hurt. 5 things are, in order to heal, I've used this language before, you have to feel. So heal and feel, those are the first 2. But you cannot heal what you don't reveal, right? So that's the 3rd. Heal, feel, reveal. 4th is, once you heal, feel, and reveal, begin to reveal some of this through talking or journaling or processing. Sometimes with my kids, I have them do art therapy. Sometimes we're doing music therapy. There's lots of ways to sort of externalize the trauma and the pain that's inside of you, but you got to reveal it to someone. That's exactly why Meghan Markle said that she felt like she had to talk to somebody and tell them what her thoughts were. Otherwise, if she kept them inside, she was going to become more and more depressed. So heal, feel, reveal. And then once you begin to reveal, then you can start to deal. You can begin to deal with the trauma, the pain, the hurt, the heartache, the frustration, the disappointment, all of that. And then once you deal with it, you can focus on what's real. And why that's so important, those five constructs: heal, feel, deal, or heal, feel, reveal, deal, and then what's real. Why what's real is so important is because many times we lie to ourselves, right? We compartmentalize our emotions, our feelings. We hide from the reality of our truths, and we don't focus enough on the healing process of what we've been through. Serene says, maybe 10 years ago, I would say she should have known. But when you look at the many, many white spaces we enter in all aspects of our lives, our being, are we not allowed to expect to be treated well? Surprised, but by the level of microaggression, racism, am not allowed to get out. Interesting. So I think that, when it comes to new experiences, for example, for Meghan Markle, she didn't grow up in the royal family. One would say that maybe she should have known because we find ourselves in many other white spaces. But that's what I'm talking about when I talk about real, right? Because happened. Sometimes we lie to ourselves, Serene, and I hope I'm saying that your name correctly. Sometimes we tell ourselves that our experience is going to be better than we think. Even in not large institutions, but smaller systems, maybe relationships. How many of us have been in a relationship where we told ourselves, this person lies all the time, or they cheat, or this person's a racist, or this person's a sexist, or whatever. They're xenophobic, they're misogynistic. But we tell ourselves, you know what? They haven't dealt with us yet. And if they start dealing with us, then they're going to change the way that they function. They're going to change the way that they act. They're going to do better. They're going to do right. This is a book that my girlfriend wrote with her friend, Do Right by Me, right? This is about learning to raise Black children in white spaces. They're going to do right by me. And so I think that that's what Meghan felt, that they'll do right by her. They didn't do right by Princess Diana, but this man, Prince Henry, loves me, and they'll figure it out. They'll do right by me. And I think it's a misnomer, because we can't do right by each other if we don't have these conversations and acknowledge our past, our really ugly, dirty, hurtful, racist past, right? We're talking about the monarch. And even Prince Henry, he said in the interview, he was like, I just didn't have to experience racism. So I didn't ever have to think about it until I partnered with Meghan, who is a woman of color, and then I had to deal with it. Well, that's what white privilege is all about. It's not having to deal with all of the atrocities that happen to Black and brown and indigenous people because you're white. And so you're afforded the level of, entitlement that you can walk in these spaces and not worry about what it feels like, what it looks like, the heartache and the shame or the embarrassment of walking in your own skin and feeling good about it when people want to make you feel bad about it. Serene said, I was ranting a bit, but I am in support of Miss Meghan. I think we need to be in support of all of these women of color. And we need to figure out a way to lift each other up, even if we don't agree with everything, because we're not going to agree with everything that anybody says. But we can agree that many of us have found ourselves having very similar experiences in institutions and firms where no matter how well we do, no matter how far we go, there's still a little bit of a glass ceiling, even in the United States, where we have a woman in the highest office in the land, our vice president, Senator Kamala Harris, and yet we still find ourselves in these places. Toya says, how about colorism? Colorism is a thing too, for sure. And colorism impacts all of us as well in certain places, especially when they don't label it with like racism, but they label it based on the texture of your skin. So lighter skinned persons or darker skinned persons are not treated in the same way. Helen says Meghan had two strikes from the beginning, American and Black, right? That is true what Helen is saying. But now let's think about ourselves. Do we have multiple strikes against us as well? Serene says, I've been in the white spaces and suffered racial trauma unknowingly and knowingly. Like many of us. Jen says, blessed week to all of you. Serene says, Prince like being a manager of all white people, like being a manager of all people, white people. I got you. Yes. And then Serene says, that's an all-day discussion and weekend, the level of audacity that happens there, been there. And Helen says, I've been in a situation where I was the only person of color, the oldest, and had to speak up. So this is an interesting conversation about what spaces we find ourselves in. As women, as Black people, as brown people, as indigenous people, as different people. Right? But specifically, we're talking about race and family. And if you find yourself in the intersectionality within a family system that doesn't accept you because of how you look, what do you do to sustain your own well-being? Many of us in the crew, and make sure that you share this, because I think this is a very important conversation that I want to keep going. Many of us in the crew have found ourselves in those spaces our entire lives. And quite frankly, I think what people do is they suppress it. They suppress it. They act like it's not happening. They continue to try to climb the ladder, and they tell themselves, if I just run faster, if I leap further, if I'm healthy, if I do a better job than everyone else, if I get an A+++, or great evaluation, then they'll accept me. And the depression comes on when you realize that you can't run fast enough. You can't jump high enough. You can't do it well enough in some spaces to be accepted for simply who you are. You could be powerful and phenomenal beyond measure, and it still would not matter. I want to make sure that I get all these conversations in here. Helen says, Jen says, good to catch you. I've you on live. Tune into Zoom tomorrow evening. All right, awesome. Thank you for tuning in. Yes, and thank you for reminding me that tomorrow evening we're going to have a COVID conversation. So tune in. I've posted it. It's going to be live with Shirley Ralph and 2 other amazing panelists, and we're going to be talking about women, specifically Black women, and our fight in this COVID-19 pandemic. So tune into that. So thank you for reminding me of that, Jen. Let's see. Billy Joe says, remember when I got removed from diversity group because they said I was white, not Latina, and couldn't represent CFT? Yes, because of my last name. When we had the firm research on the University of Racism. Yes, BJ, I remember that, which made no sense. As a Latinx woman, that you would be removed from the diversity team. This is what I'm talking about. And for those of you who don't know, I worked with BJ at Drexel. And for many years, we had an amazing program and department that was built from the ground up from Dr. Marlene Watson. And she really fundamentally, I think, believed that we could create something different and something wonderful where we could honor diversity from the student body to the faculty. And we did it for many, many years. Unfortunately, the system changed, and I think white fragility took place. And there would be things like what BJ is talking about, where true diversity wasn't really honored. Because if true diversity is honored, then everybody is welcome to the table, and everybody has value. And then everyone should be able to have their voices heard. That's what true diversity is. That doesn't mean we all agree, but it does mean that we bring everybody's voices to the table. Serene says, thank you so much for this discussion and offering a space for us to share. Thank you. Listen, this is about our crew. This is about our crew connecting relationships for epic wins. And when we do that, we win. We elevate each other's voices. We create a safe space for us to talk about this stuff, because this stuff is traumatic. I can tell you a number of clients that I work with that are now talking about the trauma that they've stuffed because they were surviving in the corporate world in a way that didn't allow them to be their full selves. So they had to compartmentalize, they had to move around, they had to deny sometimes the overt and covert racism that was happening. And they found themselves in spaces where they weren't welcome. And quite frankly, they felt like they were a threat. Those types of experiences cost us something. And it takes a toll on us if we don't talk about it. If we don't talk it out, then we're going to end up acting it out. And many of us can find ourselves guilty of taking our frustrations about being oppressed and targeted and racially profiled and treated unfairly. We can take that out on our own families. So now we've been treated unjustly, and now we're treating other people unjustly, which is not healthy either. Billy Joe says, until I came in with big curly hair and a bold colored dress, and then they didn't recognize me. Oh, I remember that too, with your beautiful colors and your big hair. And I just loved it. And you showing the full flavor of who you are as a human being. That's exactly what we're talking about. Whew, take a breath. This other book, these are kind of my 3 staples here right now. It's Do Right by Me. I'm still reading this one. It is Every day I pray, right? This is the oldie but goodie with Ayanna Vasant. And I do think that we all need prayer in order to go through the day the way that we have to go through the day. And of course, you know, connections matter. I'm sorry, Courageous Conversations Connect. I don't even know my own book, Courageous Conversations Connect. And when I read through these books throughout the day, one of the things I'm reminded of is how powerful we truly are as humans, as women, as Black women and brown women and Indigenous women and men as well, you know. But one of the things I'm also reminded of is that we have to do right by each other. We also have to have these courageous conversations with ourselves and each other. You all know in the first chapter of my book, I talk about radical self-care in action. How do you have this courageous conversation with yourself? What has the life that you lived cost you? What has your silence cost you? Oprah asked a question that I thought was a pivotal question. She asked Meghan Markle, were you silent or were you silenced? I think that's a really deep question to ask somebody, because one part of the question poses this idea that if you were silent, that this was a willful decision to be silent, right? The other part of the question poses this idea that you weren't willful or complicit in being silent. You in some way were silenced by the firm, by the institution, by what it represents, by the othering, if you will, by being such an outlier that you wouldn't be accepted no matter what you've done. And how many of us find ourselves in places and spaces like what Billy Joe talked about, like what Helen talks about, where we think about ourselves and we want to raise our voices, but the institution or the firm or that entity is so large, so powerful, so threatening that what we face possibly is losing our jobs or losing our income or not being able to pay our bills or take care of our families. And so we then remain silent, but not because we want to. In some ways, it's because we're forced to. So that question that Oprah asked Meghan about, were you silent willfully of your own volition, or were you silenced by an institution that basically said, if you speak up, something bad's going to happen and we can't protect you? And so I think that this is why I feel like the conversation is so important for us to have with ourselves about what it cost us to be silent, what it cost us to not use our voices, what it cost us to be silenced, right? And what it cost us to stuff it. And I get it that there might be some places and spaces where you don't feel comfortable elevating your voice, or you feel threatened, or you may feel that you're not going to be accepted. And so this is why therapeutic intervention is so important. You got to find safe spaces. This is why what we're doing here at the Courageous Conversations Connect space is so important. You have to find the spaces and the places where you will be accepted for who you are, the full human being, the authentic human being, the precious and powerful human being, where you can talk about this kind of stuff. Allison, hey, Allison, she says, Dr. RG, I'm going to send you a poem that I wrote called Unwelcomed Weeds. I wrote it in July of 2020 to pen my feelings about how I've been treated in the workplace. Thank you, Allison. I appreciate that. And we have to connect. So let's make sure that happens this week. But I look forward to the poem. That sounds about right. Unwelcome weeds, right? And all of our experiences they're not for naught. They're meant to teach us something. You know, I always say that when we're in the midst of a storm, most of us are in the middle of a storm, we're coming out of a storm, or we're moving into a storm. And storms are meant to constrict us. Storms are meant to connect us. Storms are meant to sometimes convict us, right? And storms, quite frankly, sometimes are meant for us to communicate what we're feeling. Helen said, I thought that was quite profound. I did too. Helen, if you're talking about the silent or silenced. And for those of you, Helen, has been to Drexel as well. So they choose to leave and let their voices be heard. Yes. Billy Joe says, I think when it comes to mental health and suicide, you are silent initially because of fear. You doubt yourself and are embarrassed. That was my experience. I was angry and afraid, didn't have a safe space. Absolutely. Absolutely, BJ. And thank you for sharing that. I see Darlene on. Hey, Darlene, good morning. Thank you for sharing that, BJ, because I think that when it comes to our voices, sometimes we often feel very alone. And we feel that no one else is experiencing any mental health challenges. No one is feeling the way that we're feeling. And to your point, BJ, and to what Meghan Markle's point was, sometimes we have to, despite the fear and being ashamed or afraid or feeling so alone, we have to find a space that we feel safe enough to articulate how we're feeling so that we can move to a healthier place. And there are places, and maybe Morgan can find it, to put up the suicide hotline number where you can reach out and talk to someone 24 hours a day if you're ever feeling that you want to check yourself out of here, right? Because I typically think that people don't want to end their lives. They just don't feel like they have other options available to them. They don't have the coping mechanism or the belief that things are going to get different or be different, or things are going to get better. And I will tell you that that is not true. There's always another day. Just like there's another breath, there's another day, there's another opportunity to live your best life. And sometimes you just have to find a therapist, a spiritual advisor, a friend. BJ and I have been friends for years. And, you know, that's why we were texting back and forth when Bella was in the hospital in surgery yesterday. For those of you who don't know, Bella is BJ's little doggy. And so therefore, I feel like I'm Bella's auntie. Bella has been to my home before, our home now, Morgan and I. This was before Morgan and I were together. And, you know, she's just lovely, bubbly energy. So when I found out she was having surgery, I was like, oh, my goodness, I'm going to make sure that I pray that she's okay. So this is what friends do for one another. But sometimes people don't have those friends in their lives. They don't have family members, or they're in a family system that doesn't believe in them, doesn't affirm them, doesn't respect them, doesn't honor them. And so we got to find a space to allow us to do the necessary internal work in order to heal. Again, in order to heal, you have to feel, but you cannot heal what you don't reveal. Once you reveal it, then you can begin to deal with what's real. BJ says, no. Helen says, I appreciate the platform. I might miss some of the broadcast due to physical therapy. Well, that's okay. Physical therapy is important. I need to be in physical therapy myself. BJ said, little do you know, when you speak up, you act as in someone else's voice and encourage them and save yourself. You never know who is suffering in silence and who you might save. Bella is saved us all from the raccoons. She loves her auntie. Yes, Bella did save us from our raccoons. From the raccoons. But, you know, BJ, what you're saying in terms of just speaking up, this is very true, that there are some people who will not be able to speak up. And then we have to be their voices. If they don't feel comfortable, or if they feel threatened, or if they feel overwhelmed, or they feel silenced, then those persons who may have come before them or have a little bit more strength, those are persons that have to speak up for themselves and for others. This weekend, I was talking about, and I have to reach out to her, my friend and mentor, Dr. Marlene Watson. I call her HT2, stands for Harriet Tubman 2. Excuse me. And the reason I think about her is because she was my mentor. She still is my mentor. And she was waging a war and a battle behind the scenes in the institution of the academy way before I ever met her. And it was because of her battle and her voice that I was able to move into that institution and move up through the ranks. And she taught me some valuable lessons about how you stand flat-footed, and that you speak for yourself, and you speak for all those that are coming behind you. She also taught me that if you are the first, there's no shame in that. The shame sometimes is if you're the first, but the last, because you need to kick the door wide open for the other people to come behind you. So we're gonna take a quick break for our sponsors, and we will be right back So as we come back, we'll sort of wrap up with some stories about what our victories have been for our crew. Okay, so stay with us. We'll be right back. And good morning again. This is yours truly, Dr. Argy. For anybody that's just starting to watch us or just coming on, this is the Courageous Conversations Connect space. And this is, of course, March 10th, 2021. This is Women's Month. We just passed on Monday, Women's International Day. Shout out to all of those women who are out there doing phenomenal things. And shout out to all of us that are on this platform. I wanted us to wrap up our time together, just putting in the chat one thing that you can look to celebrate a win when you've had to deal with racism, when you've had to deal with a family situation where you weren't accepted, or a workplace situation where you weren't accepted. What one thing can you say helped you to feel better about yourself, helped you to feel like you could celebrate a win? Or if you can't put the thing, put the person. If I were, like I started saying, if I were to put a person in the chat, I would put Dr. Marlene Watson in the chat, because she was the person that believed in me in the workplace and in the institution, in some ways, way before I believed in myself. She was speaking up for Black and Brown and Indigenous people. She was speaking up for diversity and culture, diversity and inclusion and equity and social justice and belonging way before we started talking about this after George Floyd. She's been on this journey of racial equity for over 30 years. And so she would be the person that I would put in the chat that elevates the win for me. Helen says, I have a friend. What is it that you would like me to do? Oh, okay, great. All right. So I didn't know what you wanted me to do. Morgan wanted me to talk about the Black Women's COVID-19 event that's happening on Thursday. It is going to be at 6 o'clock. We're going to be having some phenomenal speakers on the panel. I am a part of an esteemed panel, of which is going to be moderated by Shirley Ralph Hughes. And I'm probably sure that one of my favorite senators, well, my favorite senator, Senator Hughes, may pop in. So be sure to join. Morgan put the flyer up. So be sure to join us at 6 o'clock on that Zoom platform. We're going to have a rich conversation about what Black women have to deal with as it relates to this pandemic of COVID-19. And certainly, quite frankly, I know that we're going to have a discussion also about race, right? Because race does matter. And we are dealing with two viruses, or what I would call two pandemics, COVID-19 and systemic racism. So please make sure that you join us for that conversation. It's going to be a rich conversation, and I am very, very excited to be a part of that. So thank you for that, Morgan, for making sure that you got that up there. I wanted to say that, so Helen says, I have a friend who's blind, and she wanted me to have her something, poem, or the problem is she lives in Colorado. I told her I will always be in her here in her best interest. She needs someone who lives there. Oh, she wants, I guess, therapist or a person or something like that. I don't know what the POA stands for, Helen. But so to Helen's point, though, everyone needs someone. And if you don't have someone that's close to you, you need to, therapy is a wonderful opportunity right now. I know therapists are really, really full. Therapists are very, very busy, but don't get discouraged. Keep looking for the right fit for you. It's a wonderful opportunity for many of us to be able to process out our injuries in a safe way, our trauma, our pain, our experiences, and also, quite frankly, to begin to elevate the things that we need to do in order to live our best lives. Kimberly says, shout out to Dr. RG for everything you do. Keep the conversation going. Thank you so much, Kimberly. Darlene says prayer and faith are the two things that keep her winning. I love that. Prayer and faith. Oh, power of attorney. That's what the POA stands for. I knew that, but I wasn't sure within that context. So, okay, I understand that. The power of attorney. So when you all think again of the person or the thing that has caused you to be able to win in situations. And when I say win, I don't necessarily mean that everything turned out exactly as you would like, but sometimes we have to look at the silver lining. We have to look at the lessons learned. We have to look at what our takeaways are. And if you look at those three things, then you can come out of a situation having it have utility, having that situation gain value, and quite frankly, build resilience and character for the next journey, for the next situation that you're going to end up having to go through. And quite frankly, there will always be another situation. We have not exhausted this conversation on race. We have not exhausted this conversation around our family systems. There are transgenerational patterns. Some of you on this platform know that language very well. Some of you all don't. It means that we pass down the patterns, the cycles, the themes from one generation to the next, just like what's going on in the monarchy. And oftentimes that does not help us if we don't understand where it comes from or what it is that has caused us to not be healthy. So those are things that we need to pay attention to in terms of the cycles. And we need to focus on forgiveness. You know, the forgiveness sometimes of ourselves can help us to then think about who else do we need to forgive. Morgan put something in here, but I don't see something safe links protection. I don't see how that.
It's the link for the women's event. So it doesn't, on our end, doesn't show up exactly the way it should, but actually there's a icon that shows up on the viewer, the crew's end, on whether on Facebook or YouTube. They actually can see what the link is. So it doesn't show. It shows up all these letters and cryptic stuff on our end. So don't worry about it. It shows up right on their end.
Okay, good. I'm glad that that you guys got that. So listen, you know, what I want to leave you all with is, if you can look up our deepest fear. In fact, maybe I'll look it up and we'll end with that, because it's one of my favorite poems. Our deepest fear. Here we go. Yeah. See. So I'm going to leave you guys with this right now. Our deepest fear, it's by Marianne Williamson, and it says, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightening about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all made to shine, meant to shine, all made to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It is not just in some of us, it is in everyone. And as we let our light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. That's one of my favorite poems. Nelson Mandela spoke of that poem when he got out of prison and he became president in South Africa. So everybody thinks that he wrote it, but really Marianne Williamson wrote it. So that's what I wanted to leave you all with, that we need not let our fear paralyze us or keep us in a holding pattern or keep us from our voice, whatever our truth is. We must bypass the fear. We feel it, don't bypass it, I'm sorry. Feel it, feel the fear, but then begin to shine and make manifest why you were here and meant to be here. So that's our conversation today. We're talking about race matters. We're talking about family matters. Hope that was helpful to our crew. Have a beautiful, the weather is really great in this region. So if you are in this region, get out and get some vitamin D, because we haven't had great weather for a while. It's been a pretty cold winter, if you will. So get out and get some vitamin D and have a beautiful day. Don't forget to breathe. Don't forget to journal. And don't forget to love you. We love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. No one else told you that. We're telling you we love you. Have a beautiful day on purpose from our heart to you. Bye-bye.